Ambassador Marcus Chen had been sitting in the same position for 3 hours, his hands folded neatly on the polished obsidian table that stretched across the council chamber like a dark river. The air recyclers hummed their mechanical lullaby, mixing the atmosphere to accommodate 12 different species, creating a cocktail of gases that made his nose itch. But Marcus didn't move. He never moved during these sessions, not unless absolutely necessary. The Galactic Council's high chamber was a monument to intimidation. Curved walls rose like the inside of a massive egg, their surface embedded with millions of tiny lights that represented every inhabited world in the galaxy. The ceiling disappeared into darkness above, while the floor beneath was transparent aluminum, revealing the swirling clouds of the gas giant below. Everything about this place was designed to make visitors feel small, insignificant, temporary. Marcus had been Earth's envoy for 5 years. 5 long years of careful words, calculated gestures, and swallowed pride. 5 years of being humanity's face to a galaxy that saw his species as barely evolved primates who had stumbled into space travel through blind luck and stubborn determination. The Zephyrian delegate was speaking again, its voice a melodic whistle that the translation matrix converted into crisp, emotionless words. The human colony on Kepler 442b continues to expand beyond the agreed boundaries. This represents a clear violation of Resolution 4851. Marcus had heard this complaint before. The Kepler colony was growing because humans bred faster than the Council anticipated. They hadn't accounted for humanity's tendency to see open space as an invitation rather than a boundary. But explaining that would be useless. The Council saw human expansion as aggression, human innovation as cheating, human persistence as obstinacy. "Honored delegates," Marcus said, his voice carrying the same careful neutrality he had practiced for years. The Kepler colony remains within the territorial limits established by the Terran Accords. Any appearance of expansion is due to vertical development, not horizontal encroachment. The Krillian representative, a creature that looked like a cross between a praying mantis and a tree, clicked its mandibles in what Marcus had learned was their version of laughter. Vertical development. How quaint. Do humans believe they can redefine the nature of space itself? Other delegates joined in with their species' equivalents of laughter. The sound filled the chamber like a discordant symphony of mockery. Marcus felt the familiar burning sensation in his chest, the one that had been growing stronger with each passing session. He breathed slowly, counting to 10 in his mind, then counting again. Admiral Thex of the Dominion Worlds leaned forward, his blue-scaled face catching the light from the star maps. "Perhaps," he said, his voice dripping with condescension, "it is time to discuss more direct oversight of human expansion. Clearly, your species lacks the discipline for responsible growth. The Terran colonies operate within all established parameters," Marcus replied. His voice remained steady, but his knuckles had gone white where his hands pressed together. Earth formally objects to any discussion of oversight that was not part of the original agreements. "Earth objects," repeated the Vanthi delegate, its gas-filled helmet making its voice sound hollow and distant. How often we hear these words. Perhaps Earth should learn when objections are unwelcome. The Zephyrian delegate whistled again, longer this time. "The human continues to speak, as though his species holds equal standing in this council. How long must we endure this charade?" Marcus felt something shift inside his chest. The burning sensation spread downward, into his stomach, his arms, his hands. He had been holding it back for so long, pushing it down, boxing it up, pretending it didn't exist. The human colony on Kepler wasn't the real issue. It never had been. This was about putting humanity in its place. This was about making sure the newest species in the galaxy understood exactly how small and insignificant they were. "The human delegation," Admiral Thex continued, "seems to have forgotten that council membership is a privilege, not a right. Perhaps it's time to remind them." The Krillian representative clicked its mandibles again. "Indeed. The question becomes how best to educate them in proper decorum." Marcus stood up slowly. Around the chamber, dozens of alien eyes turned toward him. Some showed curiosity, others amusement. A few displayed what might have been anticipation. He walked to the center of the chamber, where a small platform allowed speakers to address the full council. "Honored delegates," he began, and his voice carried clearly in the sudden silence. "Humanity has served faithfully in this council for 5 years. We have honored every agreement, respected every boundary, and contributed to every joint endeavor. Yet each session brings new accusations, new restrictions, new attempts to diminish our standing among the civilized worlds. Because you do not belong among civilized worlds," Admiral Thex said flatly. "Your species is barely a millennium past stone tools. You wage wars over resources that could be synthesized, over territories that could be shared, over beliefs that should be private. You are children playing with weapons you don't understand." The burning in Marcus's chest flared higher. "We are children," he repeated slowly. "Yes, I've heard that before. We're told we're too young, too violent, too unpredictable. We're told we don't understand the sophisticated nature of galactic civilization." "Because you don't," the Vanthi delegate said. "Your species believes every problem can be solved with force, every obstacle overcome through aggression. You lack the wisdom that comes with age." Marcus looked around the chamber at the assembled delegates. 37 different species, representing thousands of worlds and billions of sentient beings. The pinnacle of galactic civilization. The wise, ancient races who had learned to solve their problems through dialogue, negotiation, and careful compromise. The wise races who had been fighting the same 3 border disputes for the last 600 years. The ancient species who had collectively achieved exactly 0 major technological breakthroughs in the past century. The sophisticated civilizations who had voted 17 times on the proper way to address trade route taxation without reaching any conclusion whatsoever. "You speak of wisdom," Marcus said. And something in his voice made several delegates lean forward. "You speak of age and experience and sophistication. But in 5 years, I have watched this council debate the same issues, reach the same stalemates, and maintain the same problems that have existed for centuries. Where is the wisdom in that?" Admiral Thex rose from his seat, his blue scales darkening with anger. "You dare lecture us on wisdom? Your species has existed as a spacefaring civilization for barely 50 years. And in those 50 years," Marcus said, his voice getting stronger, "humanity has eliminated 4 diseases that had plagued our species for millennia, developed faster than light communication systems that cut transmission time by 60%, and established 17 colonies on previously uninhabitable worlds. What has this council accomplished in the same period?" The chamber erupted in angry sounds from a dozen different species. Delegates rose from their seats, translation matrices struggling to convert the cacophony of outrage into coherent language. Through it all, Admiral Thex's voice cut clear and sharp. "Silence." The chamber fell quiet instantly. Admiral Thex moved down from his elevated position, his footsteps echoing on the transparent floor. He was larger than Marcus, broader and taller, with the natural authority of someone born to command. When he reached the human envoy, he looked down with undisguised contempt. "Your species," he said quietly, "has forgotten its place." Without warning, his hand came up in a backhanded strike that caught Marcus across the face. The sound echoed through the chamber like a gunshot. Marcus stumbled backward, his hand going to his cheek where 4 parallel scratches had appeared, drawn by the Admiral's claw-tipped fingers. Blood dripped onto the transparent floor, bright red against the swirling clouds below. The chamber was dead silent. No delegate moved. No translation matrix hummed. Even the air recyclers seemed to pause in their endless circulation. Marcus straightened slowly. He touched his cheek, looking at the blood on his fingers with an expression of mild surprise, as though he had never seen his own blood before. Then he looked up at Admiral Thex, and something in his eyes made the Admiral take an involuntary step backward. "That," Marcus said quietly, "was a mistake." His voice had changed. The careful neutrality was gone, replaced by something that made the temperature in the chamber seem to drop 10 degrees. Several of the more sensitive species actually shivered. "A mistake?" Admiral Thex tried to regain his composure, puffing out his chest. The only mistake was allowing your species into this council in the first place. You are savages pretending to be civilized, children playing dress-up in adult clothes. Marcus wiped the blood from his cheek again, smearing it slightly. Children, he repeated. Yes. You keep saying that. Do you know what you've never asked? What? You've never asked what we were children of. Around the chamber, delegates began to feel something they hadn't experienced in their long, comfortable lives as the dominant species of the galaxy. It started as a small knot in their stomachs, a tiny voice in the back of their minds that whispered warnings in languages older than civilization. Fear. Marcus began to walk slowly around the chamber's perimeter. His footsteps seemed too loud on the transparent floor, each one echoing like a heartbeat. You call us violent, and you're right. You call us unpredictable, and you're right. You call us children, and you're absolutely right. But you've made a fundamental error in your assumptions. What error? Admiral Thex demanded, though his voice had lost some of its certainty. Marcus stopped walking and turned to face the assembled council. In the starlight filtering through the chamber's dome, the scratches on his cheek looked deeper, darker, like war paint applied with deliberate precision. You've assumed that being a child is a weakness, he said. You've assumed that being young means being harmless. You've assumed that because we're new to your civilized galaxy, we must naturally conform to its rules. He smiled, and it was not a pleasant expression. You've forgotten that children grow up, and some children grow up to be monsters. The silence in the chamber now had weight to it, pressing down on the delegates like the atmosphere of a heavy world. The Vanthi representative's breathing apparatus hissed faster. The Krillian's mandibles had stopped clicking entirely. For 5 years, Marcus continued, I have sat in this chamber and listened to your condescension. I have smiled and nodded and played the role of the grateful primitive, thankful for your tolerance and guidance. For 5 years, I have held my tongue when you insulted my species, my world, my people. For 5 years, I have been very, very good at pretending to be civilized. Admiral Thex was trying to maintain his composure, but something primal in his hindbrain was screaming at him to run. Threats will not improve your standing in this council, human. Threats? Marcus tilted his head slightly, like a predator studying prey. Admiral, I haven't made any threats. I'm simply informing you that our relationship has fundamentally changed. You see, there's something about my species that never made it into our formal application for council membership, something we thought might make you uncomfortable. What are you talking about? The Zephyrian delegate's whistle had become high and shrill. Marcus reached into his jacket and withdrew a small device, no bigger than his thumb. It looked innocuous, almost like a decorative pin. He held it up so the entire chamber could see it. This is a neural suppression field generator, he said conversationally. For the past 5 years, it has been preventing certain aspects of my personality from expressing themselves, certain tendencies that my government thought might interfere with diplomatic relations. The Krillian representative found its voice. What kind of tendencies? Marcus looked directly at Admiral Thex, and his smile became something that belonged in nightmares. The kind that earned me 17 confirmed kills during the Martian Rebellion. The kind that made me the most decorated soldier in Human Space Command before I was recruited for diplomatic service. The kind that kept me awake for 72 consecutive hours during the siege of New Kyoto, hunting rebel commandos through the maintenance tunnels like they were rabbits in a warren. The device in his hand made a small clicking sound. The kind of tendencies, Marcus concluded, that my species thought you should never, ever see. Around the chamber, emergency lights began to flash as various species' biometric sensors detected unprecedented spikes in stress hormones, adrenaline, and fear pheromones. The air recyclers kicked into overdrive, struggling to process the sudden chemical changes in the atmosphere. Marcus crushed the suppression device in his fist. The small piece of technology crumbled like an eggshell, its fragments falling to the transparent floor with tiny, almost musical sounds. Now then, he said, and his voice had become something soft and terrible. Shall we discuss the Kepler colony situation again? Or would you prefer to talk about something else entirely? Admiral Thex took another step backward. Around the chamber, delegates were rising from their seats, some moving toward the exits, others reaching for personal communication devices. The careful order of the Galactic Council, maintained for centuries through protocol and mutual respect, was cracking like ice in spring. Marcus stood in the center of it all, blood still drying on his cheek, his hands hanging loose at his sides. For 5 years, he had been the perfect diplomat. The ideal representative of a young species eager to join galactic civilization. That diplomat was gone. What remained was something far older, far more dangerous, and far less interested in playing by anyone else's rules. The monster was awake. The emergency session of the Galactic Council's Security Committee convened exactly 4 hours after Ambassador Chen's revelation. The main chamber had been cleared and sealed, but the delegates could still feel the lingering tension that seemed to hang in the recycled air like smoke after a fire. Admiral Thex sat at the head of the crescent-shaped table. His blue scales, still darker than usual, 4 parallel scratches ran down his left hand where he had reflexively clawed at his chair during the human's transformation. Around him, the other members of the Security Committee shifted uncomfortably in their seats. The human must be removed immediately, declared Councillor Vex High of the Ethereal Dominion. Her crystalline form caught the chamber's dim lighting, throwing prismatic patterns on the walls. What we witnessed was a clear threat to Council security. Was it a threat? Asked Director Moltar of the Hive Worlds, his compound eyes reflecting the room multiple times over. The human made no aggressive moves. He simply revealed information. Admiral Thex's hand went unconsciously to the healing scratches on his face. Information? He admitted to being a killer, a soldier masquerading as a diplomat. Many of us have military backgrounds, pointed out Commander Euris of the Stellar Federation. That alone is not grounds for expulsion. This is different. Admiral Thex leaned forward, his voice dropping to a whisper that somehow carried more menace than shouting. You didn't see his eyes. You didn't feel the change in him. This wasn't just revealing a military background. This was... He paused, searching for words. This was like watching a domesticated animal remember it was predator. In the observation booth above the committee chamber, Marcus Chen sat in a holding cell that was more comfortable than most hotel rooms. Soft lighting, temperature control, even a selection of human-appropriate food and beverages. The Galactic Council prided itself on civilized treatment of prisoners, even prisoners who had terrified them into lockup. Marcus was reading a book. It was an old-fashioned paper book, something he had carried in his diplomatic case for years, but never had time to open. The Art of War by Sun Tzu, translated into 17 different languages including Galactic Standard. The irony wasn't lost on him. A soft chime indicated someone was requesting entry. Marcus didn't look up from his book as the cell's force field deactivated and Dr. Zelia entered. The Alcurian physician was one of the few beings in the station that Marcus had always respected. Her species had developed healing into an art form, and she had treated everyone from the lowliest maintenance workers to high-ranking ambassadors with the same care and attention. Ambassador Chen, she said quietly, her melodic voice carrying the concern that made her such an effective healer. May I examine your injuries? Marcus closed his book, marking his place with a finger. The scratches are superficial. They'll heal on their own. I wasn't talking about the scratches. He looked at her then, really looked. Dr. Zelia's large, dark eyes held no fear, no judgment, only professional concern. Her pale blue skin had the translucent quality common to her species, and Marcus could see the slow pulse of her twin hearts through the delicate vessels in her neck. What injuries are you referring to, Doctor? She moved closer, her scanner already active. The neural suppression device you destroyed. Such devices are not used lightly, Ambassador. The feedback from its destruction must have been considerable. Marcus set his book aside and allowed her to scan him. The device hummed softly as it recorded his biological parameters. The feedback was manageable. Said, your neural chemistry suggests otherwise. Dr. Zelia studied her scanner's readouts with growing concern. Ambassador, How long were you using that suppression device? 5 years. Since I was assigned to the diplomatic corps. 5 years? Her voice rose slightly, then dropped back to a whisper. Ambassador. Continuous neural suppression for that duration doesn't just suppress personality traits. It rebuilds them, creates new pathways, new responses, new ways of thinking. Destroying the device so suddenly. She paused, running additional scans. It's like removing the keystone from an arch. The entire structure collapses. Marcus smiled. But it wasn't the diplomatic smile he had worn for 5 years. It was something sharper, more genuine. Is that your professional opinion, Doctor? My professional opinion is that you're experiencing massive psychological destabilization. Your brain is essentially rewriting itself in real time, trying to reconcile 5 years of artificial personality modification with whatever you were before. She looked at her scanner again, then at Marcus with something approaching awe. The fact that you're sitting here reading philosophy instead of screaming or catatonic is unprecedented. Humans are very adaptable. This goes beyond adaptation. This is, she struggled for words, what were you? Before the diplomatic assignment? What did they suppress? Marcus picked up his book again, running his thumb along the edge of pages that had been read and reread countless times. Do you know the history of my species, Doctor? Our real history, not the sanitized version in the Council archives. I know that humans achieved spaceflight relatively recently and have expanded rapidly throughout your local sector. We achieved spaceflight, Marcus agreed. But not because we were explorers, or scientists, or philosophers. We achieved spaceflight because we were running out of room to kill each other on our home planet. Dr. Exilia's scanner trembled slightly in her hand. For most of our recorded history, Marcus continued, his voice calm and conversational. Humans have been at war. Not occasional conflicts over resources or territory, but constant, grinding, endless warfare. We've fought over land, water, food, ideas, gods, skin color, and sometimes just because we were bored. We've created weapons that could end all life on our world, then built more weapons to protect us from the first weapons. That's not unusual. Many species have violent histories. Doctor, in the last century before spaceflight, my species fought 2 global wars that killed over 100 million people. 100 million. We created industrialized killing on a scale that most species can't even comprehend. We turned murder into a science, death into an assembly line. The scanner in Dr. Zelia's hands was recording biometric data that should have been impossible. Marcus's heart rate remained steady. His breathing calm, his stress hormones normal. He was discussing mass murder with the emotional investment of someone describing the weather. And yet, she said carefully, humans joined the Galactic Council. You've been peaceful for decades. We've been managed, Marcus corrected, carefully selected, heavily screened, extensively modified. He tapped the remains of the suppression device that Dr. Exilia had collected in a specimen container. Every human in the diplomatic corps carries one of those. Every human in the trade delegations. Every human who has any contact with alien species at all. Your government is suppressing your entire diplomatic corps? Not just the diplomatic corps. Anyone who leaves Earth undergoes psychological evaluation and modification. The neural suppressors, behavioral conditioning, chemical regulation. Humanity learned very early that if the galaxy knew what we really were, they would either destroy us or quarantine us forever. Dr. Exilia set down her scanner and sat in the chair across from Marcus. What are you really? Marcus opened his book and began reading aloud. All warfare is based on deception. When able to attack, we must seem unable. When using our forces, we must seem inactive. When we are near, we must make the enemy believe we are far away. When far away, we must make him believe we are near. He closed the book and looked at her directly. We are a species that spent 10,000 years perfecting the art of killing our own kind. We developed strategies and tactics and weapon systems that your civilized species can't even imagine. We learned to think like predators because for most of our history, Everything else on our planet was trying to kill us. But surely that's in the past. Evolution, social development, education. Doctor, do you know what a human child plays with? The question seemed to come from nowhere. Dr. Zelia blinked her large eyes slowly. I assume educational materials? Creative tools? Toy soldiers? Tiny weapons? Games that simulate combat and conquest. We give our children miniature armies and teach them to play war before they can properly speak. Marcus's smile returned, and Dr. Zelia felt a chill run through her body. Even our entertainment is based on conflict. Our stories, our movies, our books, our sports. Everything revolves around competition, struggle, victory, and defeat. Many species enjoy competitive activities. Do they? When was the last time an Alcurian child pretended to be a warrior? When did a Zephyrian parent give their offspring a toy weapon? How many ethereal stories celebrate violence as heroic? Dr. Zelia realized she couldn't answer any of those questions affirmatively. Humans, Marcus continued, are what happens when evolution produces a species so dangerous that it has to develop intelligence just to avoid destroying itself. We learned cooperation not because we were peaceful, but because we were so good at killing that we needed rules to prevent extinction. The cell's communication system activated with a soft tone. Admiral Thex's voice filled the small space. Dr. Zelia, please report to the security committee immediately. Dr. Zelia stood slowly, collecting her equipment. Ambassador, what happens now? Marcus opened his book again, finding his place. That depends entirely on Admiral Thex and the security committee. They can acknowledge that they made a mistake and return to treating humanity with appropriate respect. They can apologize for the insult and continue with the business of galactic civilization. And if they don't, Marcus looked up from his book, and for just a moment, Dr. Zelia saw something in his eyes that made her understand why the Admiral had been so terrified. It was like looking into the eyes of a shark, or a wolf, or some other apex predator that had learned to walk upright and speak politely. Then they'll discover why humans carry neural suppression devices in the first place. 10 minutes later, Dr. Zelia stood before the security committee, her report displayed on the chamber's main screen. The biometric readings, psychological profiles, and chemical analyses painted a picture that made several committee members shift nervously in their seats. The human's neural chemistry is completely destabilized, she explained. The suppression device wasn't just regulating behavior. It was fundamentally altering his thought patterns, emotional responses, and decision-making processes. Is he dangerous? Admiral Thex asked bluntly. That's complicated. His stress responses are unlike anything I've seen. Situations that should trigger fear or anxiety seem to activate what I can only describe as predatory focus. His brain is processing threats and formulating responses at a rate that suggests extensive combat conditioning. Counselor Vexhi's crystalline form flickered with agitation. You're describing a living weapon. I'm describing a soldier who has been artificially modified to function as a diplomat. The removal of those modifications has restored his original psychological patterns. What does that mean for the Council? Demanded Commander Eurus. Dr. Zelia consulted her notes, though she had memorized the disturbing details hours ago. Ambassador Chen described human history to me. According to his account, humanity spent millennia developing what he called the art of war. Their entire civilization was built around conflict resolution through violence. Preposterous, Admiral Thex said. No species could reach spaceflight with that kind of social structure. Unless, Director Moltar said quietly, they developed spaceflight as an extension of their military capabilities. The committee fell silent as the implications sank in. Dr. Zelia continued her report. The ambassador also indicated that every human in the diplomatic corps carries similar suppression devices. Earth's government is apparently aware of their species' psychological profile and takes active measures to manage it. Manages it how? Asked Commander Eurus. Neural suppression, behavioral conditioning, chemical regulation. According to Ambassador Chen, any human who has contact with alien species undergoes extensive psychological modification. Admiral Thex stood abruptly, his chair scraping against the floor. We've been deceived. For 5 years, we've been negotiating with actors. Puppets controlled by hidden strings. We don't know what humanity really is. We know what Ambassador Chen really is. Counselor Vex High pointed out. The question becomes, is he an exception? Or is he representative? Dr. Zelia looked around the chamber at the assembled leaders of galactic civilization. Based on my analysis, I would recommend treating him as representative. The neural modifications were too extensive, too sophisticated, to be unique. This suggests systematic implementation across their entire diplomatic program. So every human diplomat we've dealt with, Commander Eurus said slowly, has been artificially modified to hide their true nature. It would appear so. Admiral Thex activated his communication console. Security Chief Mordak, please join us immediately. While they waited, the committee sat in uncomfortable silence. Through the chamber's windows, they could see the gas giant's swirling clouds, beautiful and serene. It was hard to reconcile that peaceful view with the revelations about humanity's hidden nature. Security Chief Mordak arrived within minutes. The massive Carillian's exoskeleton gleamed under the chamber's lights, and his compound eyes took in the assembled committee with professional efficiency. Chief, Admiral Thex said, we need a full security assessment of the human diplomatic contingent. All of them. Yes, sir. What are we looking for? Neural suppression devices, behavioral modifications, evidence of systematic deception. Admiral Thex's voice was grim. We need to know what we're really dealing with. Understood. What about Ambassador Chen? The committee exchanged glances. Finally, Counselor Vex's High spoke. Ambassador Chen remains in protective custody pending further analysis. Protective custody, Dr. Zelia repeated. For whom? Him? Or us? Admiral Thex looked toward the holding cells, where Marcus Chen sat reading his ancient book on warfare. I'm no longer certain there's a difference. In his cell, Marcus turned a page and continued reading. Around him, the greatest powers in the galaxy were learning what it meant to wake a sleeping monster. He had tried to warn them. The Security Committee's investigation took exactly 18 hours. 18 hours to dismantle 5 years of carefully constructed diplomatic theater. 18 hours to discover that humanity had been playing the longest, most sophisticated game of deception in galactic history. Security Chief Mordak stood before the full Galactic Council, his massive frame casting shadows across the chamber floor. His report lay in neat stacks before each delegate, but nobody was reading the written words. They were all focused on the images displayed on the chamber's primary screen. 17 human diplomats, Mordak announced, his voice carrying clearly through the translation matrices. All equipped with neural suppression devices. All showing similar psychological profiles to Ambassador Chen. All artificially modified to present acceptable behavior patterns to alien species. The screen showed brain scans, chemical analyses, and behavioral assessments that painted a disturbing picture. Every human in the diplomatic corps was essentially wearing a mental mask, hiding their true nature behind layers of technological conditioning. Furthermore, Mordak continued, we have discovered evidence of similar modifications among human trade representatives, cultural attachés, and scientific liaisons. Conservative estimates suggest that 93% of all humans who have had contact with council species have undergone some form of psychological modification. Admiral Thex rose from his position at the high table. His face had healed from Marcus's claws, but the psychological wounds remained visible in his darkened scales and nervous movements. The implications are clear. Humanity has perpetrated a systematic deception against the entire Galactic Council. They have hidden their true nature while infiltrating our institutions, our trade networks, our scientific programs. Murmurs of agreement rippled through the chamber. The Zephyrian delegates' whistles had taken on an agitated, high-pitched quality. The ethereal dominion's representative flickered with angry patterns of light. Even the normally placid hive worlds showed signs of distress, their compound eyes reflecting fractured images of outrage. The question before us, Admiral Thex continued, is how to respond to this betrayal. Humanity has proven themselves to be duplicitous, dangerous, and fundamentally incompatible with civilized galactic society. Counselor Vexhai rose from her crystal throne, her form casting prismatic rainbows across the chamber walls. The ethereal dominion moves for immediate expulsion of humanity from the Council and the establishment of a quarantine zone around their territory. Seconded, called the Krillian representative, its mandibles clicking rapidly. Thirded, added Director Moltar of the Hive Worlds. Admiral Thex nodded grimly. All in favor of Resolution 5847. The expulsion and quarantine of the human species. Hands, claws, tentacles, and appendages rose throughout the chamber. The count was overwhelming. 34 in favor, 2 abstaining, 1 delegation missing due to prior commitments. It was the fastest major resolution in Council history. The motion carries, Admiral Thex announced. By the authority of the Galactic Council, humanity is hereby expelled from all Council institutions and placed under permanent quarantine. No human vessel will be permitted to leave their home system. No human representative will be recognized by any Council species. No human colony will receive Council protection or support. The chamber erupted in approval. Whistles, clicks, chemical releases, and electromagnetic pulses created a symphony of satisfaction as the delegates congratulated themselves on solving the human problem once and for all. In his holding cell, Marcus Chen closed his book. He had been expecting this. The neural suppression had affected his emotional responses, but it hadn't touched his strategic thinking. Admiral Thex and the Council were reacting exactly as human military strategists had predicted they would. Fear led to anger, anger led to overreaction, overreaction led to mistakes. And humanity, as Marcus had tried to warn them, was very good at exploiting mistakes. The cell's communication system activated, but instead of Admiral Thex's voice, Marcus heard something that made him smile for the first time in hours. The incoming signal was routed through 17 different relay stations, scrambled with military-grade encryption, and broadcast on frequencies that the Council's monitoring systems couldn't detect. Mongoose, this is Pack Leader. We've been watching the news coverage. Looks like your cover's been blown. Marcus touched the hidden communication device embedded in his molars, a piece of technology so small and sophisticated that the Council's security sweeps had missed it entirely. Pack Leader, this is Mongoose. The situation has developed as predicted. Council has voted for expulsion and quarantine. Copy that, Mongoose. Phase 2 is authorized. All hunting packs are in position. Local assets have been activated. The muzzles are coming off. Right. Marcus felt something shift inside his mind, like tumblers falling into place in a massive lock. For 5 years, he had been Marcus Chen, the diplomat, the reasonable representative of a young species learning to navigate galactic civilization. That man was gone now, burned away by the destruction of his suppression device. What remained was Colonel Marcus Chen of the Human Space Command, winner of the Solar Cross, holder of the Titan Defense Medal, and the architect of the strategy that was about to unfold. Understood, Pack Leader. Beginning Phase 3. Negative, Mongoose. Phase 3 is being handled by local assets. Your mission is extraction. Hunting Pack 7 is en route to your position. Marcus looked around the comfortable holding cell, with its soft lighting and climate control and civilized amenities. Pack Leader, I'm declining extraction. I have a front row seat to the greatest show in human history. I'm not missing the finale. A pause. Then, copy that. Mongoose, happy hunting. Marcus settled back in his chair and reopened his book. Sun Tzu had a quote that seemed particularly relevant. All warfare is based on deception. When you are strong, appear weak. When you are near, appear far. Humanity had spent 5 years appearing weak, harmless, barely worthy of notice. It was time to show the galaxy what they really were. The first indication that something was wrong came from the Zephyrian home system. Their primary orbital defense platform simply went dark, its communication systems failing without warning. Within minutes, similar reports came from ethereal space, Krillian territory, and a dozen other Council worlds. Admiral Thex stood in the Council's Emergency Operations Center, watching as red warning indicators spread across the galactic map like drops of blood. What's happening? Are we under attack? No attack signatures detected, reported Chief Communications Officer Talia. The platforms are shutting down on their own. No external interference. No weapon signatures. No hostile vessels in the area. That's impossible. Defense platforms don't just malfunction simultaneously across multiple star systems. Sir, called another technician. We're receiving similar reports from trade stations, fuel depots, and communication relays. Everything with significant human components or human maintenance contracts is experiencing cascade failures. Admiral Thex felt a cold realization creeping up his spine. Pull up the records of human involvement in Council infrastructure. The main display shifted to show a three-dimensional map of Council space, with human involvement highlighted in blue. Trade agreements, maintenance contracts, technology partnerships, scientific collaborations, diplomatic exchanges. For 5 years, humanity had been weaving themselves into the fabric of galactic civilization. The map was almost entirely blue. They've been planning this, Admiral Thex whispered. For 5 years, they've been positioning themselves throughout our infrastructure. Every trade deal, every technology exchange, every maintenance contract, they've been installing backdoors. Sir, Chief Communications Officer Talia said, her voice tight with strain. We're receiving a priority communication from Earth. Admiral Chen of Human Space Command requests immediate dialogue. Admiral Chen? Admiral Thex looked confused. Ambassador Chen's title was Diplomatic Envoy, not Admiral. The main display activated, showing the angular features of an older human in military dress uniform. The resemblance to Marcus Chen was unmistakable, though this man carried himself with the confident bearing of someone who had never needed neural suppression to hide his nature. Admiral Thex, the human said, his voice carrying clearly through the chamber. I am Admiral James Chen of Human Space Command, Strategic Operations Division. I believe you have my son. Your son? Colonel Marcus Chen. You may know him as Ambassador Chen. He's been working undercover for the past 5 years, gathering intelligence on Council military capabilities, infrastructure weaknesses, and political vulnerabilities. Admiral Thex felt the chamber spinning around him. Undercover? He was a real ambassador. We verified his credentials. You verified the credentials we wanted you to verify, Admiral Chen replied calmly. Marcus is one of our best intelligence operatives. The diplomatic assignment was cover for the largest espionage operation in human history. End. 2. Around the Emergency Operations Center, status boards continued to flash red as critical systems throughout Council space reported failures, disruptions, and mysterious malfunctions. The human contamination of galactic infrastructure was revealing itself as a sophisticated sabotage network. What do you want? Admiral Thex demanded. First, I want my son returned, unharmed, and with full diplomatic immunity. Second, I want the Council's quarantine resolution rescinded immediately. Third, I want formal recognition of humanity as an equal partner in galactic affairs, not a junior member subject to condescending oversight. And if we refuse? Admiral Chen's smile was remarkably similar to his son's, cold and predatory. Admiral, your defense platforms are offline. Your communication networks are failing. Your trade routes are disrupted. Your fuel supplies are contaminated with nanoscale disruptors that will render them useless within 72 hours. Your food distribution systems are experiencing mysterious spoilage patterns that our xenobiologists assure me will spread to every agricultural world in Council space. The display behind Admiral Chen showed real-time status updates from across the galaxy. Critical systems failing. Supply chains disrupting. Infrastructure crumbling like a house of cards. Humanity hadn't fired a single shot, but they were methodically dismantling galactic civilization with surgical precision. This is impossible, Admiral Thex protested. One species can't have this kind of reach, this kind of coordination. Admiral, you keep making the same mistake. You keep underestimating us because you think in terms of your own capabilities. Your species developed spaceflight, and then expanded slowly, cautiously, building stable civilizations based on cooperation and mutual benefit. Admiral Chen leaned forward, and his eyes held the same unsettling intensity that his son had displayed in the council chambers. Humans developed spaceflight because we had filled our home planet with weapons of mass destruction and needed more room to kill each other. We expanded into space the same way we expanded across Earth, as conquerors, taking what we needed and eliminating anything that stood in our way. The Council will not negotiate under threat. You're not negotiating under threat, Admiral. You're surrendering to superior force. The human's voice remained calm and conversational, as though he were discussing the weather. For 5 years, while your species debated trade regulations and border disputes, humanity has been infiltrating every aspect of your civilization. Our people are in your trade networks, your scientific institutions, your military contractors, your agricultural systems. Admiral Thex looked around the operations center at his panicking staff, their instruments showing the systematic collapse of everything they had built over centuries of careful cooperation. What are you? We're what happens when evolution produces a species so naturally gifted at warfare that we have to actively suppress our instincts to avoid frightening our neighbors. We're the monster you let into your house because you thought we looked harmless. The display shifted to show human ships, hundreds of them, materializing from stealth positions throughout Council space. They had been there all along, hidden by technology that made them invisible to Council sensors. Sleek, angular vessels that looked more like weapons than exploration craft. The neural suppression devices weren't just hiding our diplomats' personalities, Admiral Chen continued. They were hiding our entire strategic doctrine. Every human in the diplomatic corps has been gathering intelligence, identifying weaknesses, and positioning assets for this moment. This moment? The moment when you revealed your true feelings about humanity. When you stopped pretending to see us as equals and showed us exactly what you thought of our species. Admiral Chen's expression hardened. Did you really think we would tolerate being treated as children forever? In his holding cell, Marcus Chen felt the familiar sensation of a plan coming together perfectly. Around him, the station's emergency lights began flashing as critical systems throughout Council space reported coordinated failures. His book lay open in his lap to a passage he had memorized long ago. The supreme excellence consists of breaking the enemy's resistance without fighting. His communication implant crackled to life again. Mongoose. This is Pack Leader. Council stations are requesting immediate cessation of hostilities. Admiral Thex is asking for direct communication with you. Marcus touched his molar. Patch him through. The cell's communication system activated, and Admiral Thex's voice filled the small space. The confidence and condescension were gone, replaced by something that sounded remarkably like fear. Ambassador, Colonel Chen, I want to speak with you. I'm listening, Admiral. Your father. He's offered terms. Return of diplomatic immunity, rescission of the quarantine, equal partnership in the Council. Those were his minimum demands, Marcus replied. You should probably accept them. And if we do, what happens to our infrastructure? Our defense platforms? Our trade networks? Marcus turned a page in his book, the sound clearly audible over the communication link. That depends entirely on how quickly you accept his terms, and how sincere your apology is for striking a diplomatic envoy. Apology? Admiral, you struck me in the Council chambers in front of 37 different species. You drew blood from a diplomatic representative during official proceedings. In human culture, that's considered an act of war. The communication link was silent for a long moment. Then, what kind of apology would be appropriate? Marcus smiled, though Admiral Thex couldn't see it. A public one. In the Council chambers. With full media coverage. You will acknowledge that humanity deserves equal treatment, that the quarantine was an error based on fear rather than fact, and that the Council recognizes human sovereignty and territorial rights. And the infrastructure damage will be repaired as soon as human diplomatic status is restored and our people are released from detention. Marcus closed his book and stood up. Admiral, my species learned a long time ago that the best way to win a war is to make your enemy surrender before they realize they're fighting. You never had a chance. 6 hours later, Marcus Chen stood once again in the Galactic Council chambers. The same delegates who had voted for humanity's expulsion now sat in uncomfortable silence, as Admiral Thex delivered the most humiliating apology in Council history. The session was being broadcast throughout the galaxy, carried by news networks to billions of sentient beings. "The Galactic Council," Admiral Thex said, his voice steady but his scales pale with embarrassment, "formally apologizes to Ambassador Chen and the human species for the inappropriate use of physical force during diplomatic proceedings. We acknowledge that Resolution 5847 was passed in haste and without proper consideration of the facts." Marcus stood in the same position he had occupied for 5 years, his hands folded neatly on the obsidian table. But everything else had changed. The careful neutrality was gone from his expression, replaced by the quiet confidence of someone who no longer had anything to hide. "Furthermore," Admiral Thex continued, "the Council recognizes humanity as a full and equal partner in galactic affairs. All quarantine measures are hereby rescinded, and Earth is granted permanent membership in the Council with full voting rights and territorial sovereignty." Around the chamber, the assembled delegates avoided Marcus's eyes. The Zephyrian representatives' whistles had become barely audible whispers. The Krillian's mandibles remained motionless. Even the mighty ethereal Dominion's crystalline form had dimmed to a barely visible flicker. "The Council also acknowledges," Admiral Thex said, and his voice cracked slightly, "that humanity's rapid expansion and technological development represent valuable contributions to galactic civilization, and we look forward to continued cooperation and mutual respect." Marcus inclined his head slightly. "On behalf of humanity, the apology is accepted. We look forward to working with the Council as equals rather than children." As the session ended and delegates began filing out of the chamber, Dr. Elia approached Marcus. She had been quietly watching from the medical observation area, running continuous scans on his psychological state. "Ambassador, Colonel Chen," she said quietly, "your neural chemistry has stabilized. The violent fluctuations from the suppression device destruction have normalized." "That's good news, Doctor." "Is it?" "Because, according to my readings, your current psychological profile matches exactly what you displayed after destroying the device. The calm, the strategic thinking, the predatory awareness. This is who you really are." Marcus picked up his book from the table where he had left it. "Doctor, do you know what the most dangerous thing about humanity is? Your capacity for violence? Our capacity for patience." Marcus smiled. And for the first time in days, it reached his eyes. "We spent 5 years allowing you to treat us like children. 5 years of insults, condescension, and restrictions. 5 years of pretending to be something we weren't. And all that time you were planning this? Not just me. My entire species. Every human diplomat. Every trade representative. Every scientific liaison. We were all gathering intelligence, positioning assets, and waiting for the moment when you would reveal your true feelings about us." Dr. Zelia shivered, though the chamber's temperature had remained constant. "What happens now?" Marcus walked toward the chamber's exit, pausing at the doorway to look back at the empty seats where the galaxy's most powerful beings had just been forced to bow to a species they had considered inferior. Now we get back to work. Humanity has been pretending to be civilized for 5 years. It's time to see what we can accomplish when we stop hiding what we really are." As he left the chamber, Marcus touched his communication implant one final time. "Pack leader. This is Mongoose. Mission accomplished. The muzzles are off permanently. Copy that, Mongoose. Welcome back to the real world." Outside the station's windows, human ships were already moving into new positions throughout Council space. Not as invaders or conquerors, but as equals. The galaxy was about to learn what it meant when humanity stopped pretending to be children and started acting like the apex predators they had always been. The monster was finally free.